بصح الفطور اليوم عندنا رياكت على هاد الفيديو كود سانجي and Zoro take down an admiral من طرف السيد ايمو. تصور هاد البطريق تابونا ولا بغيتو لهاد الشخص ونشوف واش كيقول.
The Admirals are one of the strongest characters in One Piece, and they're known as the Navy's strongest fighters. But would the Admirals be able to take down Sanji and Zoro, the wings of the Pirate King? Since we've seen 5 different Admirals in action throughout One Piece, let's choose Kizaru as Sanji and Zoro's matchup, since he's been an Admiral from the start to the end of One Piece without changing his position.
ديجا الغيزونمون في شكل غادي نشوفو واش غادي يغلب سانجي وزورو حيت من اقدم لي زاميرو. اوكي
In order to find out who wins between Zoro, Sanji, and Kizaru, we have to take a look at each of their kits throughout the story. And let's start off.
عندك ما تشوف صاحبي هادو راه اسئله حمار. كيفاش سانجي وزورو كتسول واش يقدو يغلبوا اميرال واحد؟ ما فهمتش صاحبي. واش كينغ وكوين هما باجي وكباجي؟ المهم زيد
The fastest man in the Navy.
The fastest man in the Navy.
The video, make sure to subscribe as I plan on doing more videos just like this in the
لا خويا فين زايد بهذا الخنز.
future. Kizaru is the one
احبس اخويا. شوف ملي لحتي هذا الفيديو كنتمنى انك تحبس يوتيوب، خلي الفرصه لينا حنايا نتالقوا شويه، ولكن بلا بيك بلا حمير بحالك ما نتالقوش، كنعكزو نديرو الايديت حنايا. المهم زيد.
Admiral in One Piece that we haven't seen take any damage whatsoever. He only suffered a minor scratch against
وكم تغيرت الأمور وكم اختلفت الحكايات. غادي تشوفوا في إيج هيد الدمج اللي خداه.
Australia and was untouched for the majority of the Marineford War.
واش أنتاتش؟ واحد ضربوا بركلة طوعوا. ما علينا سير.
But this is all due to Kizaru's speed. Oda has said that Kizaru is the fastest out of the 3 Navy Admirals, which includes Aokiji and even Akainu, who later ended up fighting each other for multiple days and changed the climate of an entire island. Kizaru
شنو العلاقة ما بين السرعة وأنك تبدل المناخ الجزيرة؟ كيعجبهم يلوحوا بحال هاد النويطات، فهمتي، كيضربك على الشعانيت.
Also be comparable to Akainu and Kuzan because all of them showed similar feats during their fights in Marineford. But Kizaru being comparable to Kuzan.
لاحظ معايا تقنية الأميرال، هجمة الخطف، الهجمة الخاطفة.
Them showed similar feats during their fights in Marineford. But Kizaru being
بقاش يدير له هادشي الراس في الراس. ملي كيدور ملي كيشوف باش داتو سكتة قلبية هاك الراق. أنا الأميرال أقوى شخص في البحرية، نعم.
comparable to Kuzan and Akainu would only hold up until the time skip, because Akainu and Aokiji could have gotten ahead of Kizaru during their fight on Punk Hazard because of Haki blooming. And if you don't know what Haki blooming is, it's essentially your Haki and power getting stronger as you fight tougher opponents during long periods of time. A great example of this would be Luffy's growth against Katakuri throughout their fight in the Mirror World. But how would
وي فعلا كنضرب بين أوكيجي وأكاينو وعلى من كيزارو. جيد، هاكي بلومين. إذا صديقنا الإنجليزي قال نقطة مهمة وغادي نعطيوه تحية على هذه النقطة الذكية الوحيدة اللي شفنا في هذا الانترو الغبي.
Kizaru compared to the Yonkos and their commanders. Back in Wano, before Big Mom and Kaido's meetup, Akainu got notice of Big Mom and Kaido potentially forming an alliance. And the general idea was that Akainu was going to send Kizaru along with the Navy to prevent this alliance from happening.
صبر علي ما كنبغيش دابا. The idea was that Akainu was going to send. فين send؟ خونا نقص قال لك انا بغيت نمشي عندهم جوج، قال لي لا سير جلس في الركنه تما راه كاين الساموراي الاقوياء.
Likely because the Navy knew how big of a fat fraud Big Mom was, and have probably watched my previous video about Big Mom's fraudulent activities.
قلت لك انا خصو يحبس الفيديوهات هذا الحمار هذا، ولكن المهم زيد نمشي الموضوع ديالنا دابا ندافعوا على بيج مام.
But Akainu ultimately stopped Kizaru from going because of the uncertainty of Wano's strength, mainly because Wano's been a closed country for years. Before Wano closed its borders, a sword god known as Ryuma was known to exist in Wano, and was said to be even comparable to Joy Boy in strength. So this thought lingered around Akainu's mind and gave Akainu Vietnam flashbacks. Whitebeard busting his back open back in Marineford, which ultimately made Akainu not take the risk of sending out Kizaru without gathering further information on Wano's
فين
samurai.
تصيفطوا صاحبي واش بغيتي كايدو بقى يشعل به بويله في داك البرتوش عنده ناري يا صاحبي تحمقوني هاد الفانز البحريه المهم زيد.
But Kizaru was still down to go stop both Big Mom and Kaido. And this isn't Kizaru being cocky at all, because the Navy has information and knowledge and know how strong
باغيين اكاينو يصيفط كيزارو يبقى يضوي كايدو على ديك القريعه الدروج ما فهمتش اصاحبي
both Big Mom and Kaido are. They know where they are, what they do, and who's on their crew. So thinking that Kizaru and Akainu don't know how powerful Big Mom and Kaido are is kind of silly. But at the end of the day, this Kizaru statement is really just a he said, she said kind of thing, and can be interpreted in different ways, and isn't an actual feat. So we'll just move on to Kizaru's actual fights during the series, such as
فايت ديالو مع سوبر نوفا في شابوندي.
Kizaru's fight against Rayleigh back in Sabaody. When Kizaru fought Rayleigh back in Sabaody, he was really just playing around with him during their fight.
No, of course, he's always playing around. He's trolling.
To pull out a sword to fight Rayleigh when he really could have just used sacred jewels or any
جبد في ايغ هيد كيب شد في راسو مكيقدرش يتململ he's trolling.
other attack that would have suited him better. But Kizaru really just realized that his subordinates were handling the Straw Hats, and due to his lazy justice, he just decided that stalling Rayleigh would still give them the win. And although Rayleigh hurt Kizaru, it really wasn't that much. It was really just a small scratch, and Rayleigh was huffing and puffing, and was on the verge of passing out when he was fighting Kizaru.
Huffing and puffing, passing out. ها مني قال لي هو نيت كيزارو كيدوي قال لي خصنا حنايا معاك جيش باش نشدوك. شنو كيعني هادشي؟ كيعني ان ريلي واز هافين بافين. الحمير هذا صاحبي وقال ليه بفمو قال لي شوف انت خصنا لك خطه ملي كتقول شي واحد خصنا خطه باش نشدوك معناه انك ضعف منه. بوان فينال نقز زيد.
Was also holding back while fighting Rayleigh because there were celestial dragons on the island, and we know that the celestial dragons can freely execute any admiral they want. As back in
holding back versus Rayleigh حيت كاين تنريوبيتو في الجزيره. بان لكم شي تنريوبيتو في داك الخضوره في داك الشجر حداهم ما بانش. واش فاكهه الضوء غادي تدمر الجزيره؟ ما نظنش. واش خصك تدمر جزيره باش تغلب انسان واقف قدامك ما عندوش اصلا قدرات مدمره بحال دابا وايت بيرد ولا لا؟ ما تحتاجش. فين هو الهولدين باك؟ ما فهمتش هذا الارغيومون هذا.
chapter 1083
وفهمتي عندهم هذه التقنيه ديال تمرير الرسائل بعجاله. فهمتي نقص لك ديجا واحد الحديث لا علاقه به ديال انه الاميرالز قال لك حقا هولدين باك ضد الريفو في ماري جواز. واش شابوندي هي الماري جواز هي الحموار.
and Greenbull with death if his actions would end up even scratching them back in the Holy Land. Kizaru also fought Marco back at Marineford, and although he did get hit by Marco at times, it didn't damage him whatsoever, as he just got back up from it seconds later. Another Marineford encounter Kizaru had was against Ben Beckman, where it looked like Kizaru was scared, but he really wasn't. He was trolling the entire time.
No, he was trolling the entire time. Trolling.
And even went on to fire at Luffy even after Ben Beckman's threat, and Ben Beckman couldn't do shit after. But the good feeling for Kizaru comes from King and Queen. We know that after the raid, Greenbull went to Wano to kill Luffy, and ended up fighting King and Queen. But this fight really doesn't mean anything because King and Queen were still wearing bandages, and were obviously still recovering from their fights.
بغيتي تسميني شي حاجة أخي ها هما قدامك باقين محرسين.
Zoro and Sanji. But after Greenbull took down King and Queen, he stated that any Marine Admiral would lose face if they were to lose against King.
واخا they will lose face. ممتاز رائع جدا. شكون كيقول هاد الهضرة؟ جرين بول. شنو قال جرين بول؟ غادي نشد زورو سانجي لوفي نامي اوفلوب شوبر وهادو كاملين غنديهم معايا. واش هذا انسان كتاخذ بهضرته؟ جاوبني لا.
And Queen. And we know that the Navy knows how strong King and Queen are, which partly attributes to their bounty. So Greenbull saying that no admiral would lose against King and Queen, while fully knowing how strong Queen and King are at their best, really just proves that the Navy admirals would be Yonko commanders, like Kaido's, even if it's a 2-on-1. But
فوالا الارغيومون مبني على مغالطه منطقيه جد واضحه. هو دار واحد الاستنتاج مبني على التحجه اللي زعما ثابته. هو في نظره بان الهضره ديال ريوكوغيو تترجم مباشره على انه قادر انه يغلب جوج ديال الكوماندرز ديال يونكو دقه واحده. شي حاجه ماشي صحيحه بيان سور ولكن ماشي مشكل.
how would this compare to Zoro and Sanji? Zoro and Sanji actually took out Queen and King.
كيفاش هاو ديس كومبير صاحبي؟ راه زورو وسانجي بزاف باش غلبوا كينغ وكوين. نقدروا نقولوا سانجي زرب على كوين ولكن ما زربش عليه بمعنى الزربه. راه تا هو تفرشخ وما قدش يكمل الكومبا موراها. دونك هادي اصلا كومبا اكستريم ديف. لا كان بالنسبه للوجيك ديالك انه كينغ وكبين اميرال يزرب عليهم، راه غيزرب على زورو وسانجي. ما كاينش تكمل الفيديو.
easily after